What you know, alibis, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Wednesday. We're going to jump into a recap of day 29 in the Chad Daybell trial. I'm here in Boise. It's been an eventful day. We're going to jump in. But first, if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell if you want notifications of when I post new content. Click that little bell icon. Music fact of the day. What song inspired Tears for Fears to write Everybody Wants to Rule the World? That would be one of my favorites, The Boys of Summer by Don Henley. Let's jump into what happened today with the defense case. After testimony, I'm going to go ahead and go over something that happened at the very end of court today. We were all out of the room. The judge said that he was going to go over some scheduling issues with the jury. So they sent us out. We were all outside talking. Before we know it, we find out the feed's back up and they're having a hearing about some rebuttal issues. Prosecutor Rocky Wixom told Judge Boyce rebuttal would take a day and a half to 2 days. There was a previous ruling on a motion in limine. It was a statement by a coworker of Tammy Daybell's, Janice Olson, about changing Tammy's life insurance policy. He ruled a few months ago that could not come in, but based on additional testimony, the state asked him to reconsider allowing them to call Miss Olson to the stand for their rebuttal. It has to do with the increase in her life insurance. She had lunch with Tammy Daybell at school, and Janice Olson will testify that Tammy said, "My husband thinks I should up my insurance at the end of my career, before I retire. He's thinking I should up my insurance." State points out Tammy Daybell was dead 6 weeks later. How is this going to come in? When Chad Daybell's daughter, Emma, testified on Monday, the defense asked her about the meeting for the life insurance. And she said Emma and Tammy both attended that meeting together. Emma was asked if Tammy had any conversations with Chad about upping her life insurance policy prior to doing so. She increased it $80,000, taking out the maximum. At the time when Emma was on the stand, Lindsay Blake objected to that, but it was overruled. And then John Pryor again asked Emma the same question. Emma testified we were sitting at a table and filling out the paperwork together. We both signed more life insurance on ourselves and we did not consult with our husbands. Emma was asked if she got the maximum allowed and she said she couldn't afford it. She said later on she did. But John Pryor asked, "So it's your understanding without discussing it with your father, your mother elected to up her insurance to the maximum amount?" Her answer was, "I saw her check that box on the paper." The state said that John Pryor and that testimony with Emma Daybell opened the door to the relevancy of whether or not Tammy talked to Chad about upping the life insurance policy. Now, in his argument, John Pryor said the key is when Tammy said, "Before I retire." Judge Boyce ruled they can call Miss Olson in rebuttal. The state will be limited in what she can be asked. Judge Boyce will ask the witness if she watched Emma's testimony or watched the hearing that was discussing this very matter. That could influence whether or not she can testify, but he will ask her that first. The other issue they brought up, they also plan to call Detective Hermasillo back. They had previously released him from his subpoena. They say he has not been watching the trial, but they do feel the need to call him for a rebuttal. Of course, Pryor did not want that. He said he did not trust that Hermasillo essentially had not watched the trial or discussed it. And Judge Boyce said every witness is put under oath, and we have to trust that they take that oath seriously, and they will allow them to call Detective Hermasillo back. They may call Coulter Cannon back as well. He was the topic with Joseph Murray's testimony about some issues with the so-called paintball incident. By the way, there is no court on Friday. It's a long weekend. We'll be back on Tuesday. I'll be in there for the morning session tomorrow. Since there's no court on Friday, I decided to fly back home tomorrow. Let's get into the testimony from today. The first witness called was testifying about the phone pings revolving around when Alex Cox was on Chad's property. What was the totality of his testimony? Basically, he just said that Chad's phone was not pinged on his own property on these key dates. We're all thinking, well, what about the raccoon text on the day Tylee was buried where he texted Tammy? He just shot a raccoon and buried it in the pet cemetery, which puts him on his property. right there at the time Alex was there or had just left. They talk about the drive testing that a previous witness testified to. The witness said it shows the coverage area that could be used by a device, but it doesn't show the signal strength from a device. It allows you to see where you would reach a tower if you utilize your device across a cellular network. He said the drive test is not supposed to locate the device, it just shows tower coverage. Pryor goes on to talk about Gladiator Forensics. That's that software company that the other witness who testified about the phone pings brought up. They reported it's only for law enforcement. Pryor asked if the witness can challenge it, and the witness says that he can't. He's not law enforcement and doesn't have access to it. Pryor asked if there was representation that Gladiator could be purchased by anyone. That would be incorrect. The witness said the tools to do drive testing are available to public, but he said he reached out to Rhodes and Swords and was told he could not buy that. They go on and talk about texts between Chad and Alex. Between September 1st and October 31st, there were 136 texts and 50 voice calls between the two. September 9th, he says there was one voice call. That would be the day Tylee was buried. September 22nd, the day JJ was last seen alive, there were 8 text messages and 1 call between Alex and Chad. On September 23rd, the day JJ was buried, there was 1 voice call, according to this witness. On cross, Rob Wood asked the witness if he's aware of the significance and the last known sighting of Tylee. He is aware of those dates, with the last sighting being September 8th and the date of the burial being September 9th. He brings up a slide that the witness admitted with locations related to Alex's device. On September 9th, there is a video attached showing when the points would show on the time frame on this map. He put the margin of error at 500 meters. Wi-Fi data put Alex in the vicinity of the townhomes in the overnight hours of September 8th and 9th, and Rob Wood asked him to pinpoint which residence Alex was at, and he can't. Rob Wood shows a chart, and there's a phone call at 8:11 a.m. on September 9th, the day Tylee is buried, from Chad's phone to Alex. He asks, what time does Alex first show up to Chad's on September 9th? And the witness says 9:21 a.m. He points out that the witness used different margins of error, but he asked him, is there anything wrong with using 100 meters margin of error like the state's witness? And he says no. Rob Wood asked, do you know the burial location of Tylee? Yes. And he says, you would agree some of these location points are in close proximity to the burn pit and the resting place of Tylee? Yes. He asked which devices he reviewed, and the witness said 10 terabytes of data, and it's a lot of work for one person. He said he spent late nights over Christmas going over this information. He's asked if he reviewed Tammy Daybell's cell phone data. The witness does not remember. Rob Wood asked, you didn't have location data for Chad placing him on his property? Are you aware he texted his wife placing himself on the property? He said it doesn't put it on his property. Rob Wood says, are you aware he talks about shooting a raccoon and burying it in the pet cemetery where Tylee was found? And the witness says yes. Prosecutor asked, are you aware upon finding the text to Tammy and combining the data for Alex Cox is how law enforcement found Tylee? And he said no. They move on to September 23rd. That is the day JJ was buried on Chad's property. They go to the call record. Chad calls Alex at 9:25 a.m. And guess what? Alex is on that property at 9:55 a.m. Again, Rob Wood asked if the witness is aware of the significance of that day. He says it's the day after the last sighting of JJ. They admit a video of Alex's data on Chad's property on this day. It shows a Wi-Fi location point with an accuracy of 50 meters. GPS location at 9:56 with 4 meters of accuracy shows Alex's location close to the spot where JJ's body was found. The witness agrees. And Rob Wood points out that on both days where the kids were buried, September 9th and the 23rd, Alex's account shows he is close to both of their burial locations. Rob Wood asked on both those days, within close to an hour of Alex arriving at Chad's, Chad called Alex Cox? Yes. On October 9th, Rob Wood asked the attempt on Tammy, October 9th. You disagree with the analysis of the number of text messages between Alex and Chad? The witness says yes. Rob Wood said, you showed 13 texts between them on October 9th, and you know Tammy reported being shot at? The witness says, I didn't know anything about being shot at. Alex's account was in Rexburg. He says not within that radius. Rob Wood asked, did you map out where else the device was? And the witness says it's not on his report. And then he's asked, were you aware where Alex went earlier that day in Idaho Falls? The witness says yes, Sportsman's Warehouse. He's asked, did you know what he purchased? And the witness says, yes, it was in the discovery. They move on to the night Tammy was killed, October 18th into the 19th. And with your 1.4-mile radius, were you aware Alex was 2.5 miles away from Chad's house that night? And he says, yes. Rob Wood points out there were multiple text messages shared between Chad and Alex the night that Tammy was killed. And he asked the witness if he's aware that both the phones they communicated on were activated October 9th, which is the date of the attempted shooting. The witness says yes. He asked if this because of the 1.4-mile radius, you did not include that, and the witness says yes. The state says in the geofence, Alex shows up on Chad's property. It's identical to where you mapped. Are you aware of Alex's relationship with Chad Daybell? The witness says brother-in-law. They ask if he's aware Alex is dead. He says yes. He's asked, did you review any iCloud of Lori's? Yes. Then Rob Wood asked, did you listen to any blessings given by Chad to Alex? There was an objection that was sustained. He points out there's no location data for Chad Daybell according to this witness, but also asked, are you aware Chad used multiple phones? Yes. On redirect, John Pryor asked, of all the phone calls referenced, was there any indication what was discussed on the phone calls? No. Then again, on September 9th and 23rd, Alex is at Chad's. Do you have any electronic information of any kind to suggest Chad Daybell's device was on the property at the exact same time? No. The next witness, Dr. Gray Hampikian. He is a DNA expert. He's a professor at Boise State. They talk about transfer DNA, how you get it. This goes on and on and on. It was 30 minutes between credentials and just explaining how trace DNA gets on other surfaces. He gives the analogy, it's like cleaning up pudding. You wipe it, then it transfers onto what you wiped it with, all that. He says our DNA is shedding all the time. He looked at 3 lab reports. The witness says that they can reanalyze those, and he focuses on biological evidence. He looked at hairs on adhesives. There were more than a dozen. Some of those hairs were brown. There was short, dark hair and blonde, and only a few were sent off for testing by the state. The state lab generally only tests if there is a root on that hair. Other labs will test without a root, and you can get DNA from a hair shaft without the root. The Estrella lab, he sent 4 brown hairs for testing. Compared to the reference samples, which were Chad, Lori, and JJ. This went through the Estrella testing. From those 4 hairs, 2 hairs came from the same person, and compared to the reference samples of Chad, Lori, and JJ, they were all excluded. Nothing indicated Chad's DNA was on anything. There are 3 conclusions he can come to. Someone is excluded. Someone cannot be excluded, meaning they could have contributed, and then inconclusive. They talk about negative results, and he says that's a bad term. If someone is accused of a crime and he swabs a knife handle and a reference sample from the accused gives a negative results, it's an exclusion. Essentially, his testimony, y'all, was just there was an absence of Chad's DNA. On cross, they point out the lab he controls is not an accredited lab like law enforcement has. If it's a criminal case, he will send it out to another lab. Did you review all the lab reports? Yes, what I was given. He also agrees that the identifications of Tylee and JJ were correct through DNA testing. He's asked about genetic material in the eye of the pickaxe. The witness agrees that was valid. The same on that blood spot on the pickaxe that was tested. He said all of those results were fine with him, as well as the genetic material on the shovel. We know that hair samples sent to the Bodie lab matched Lori Vallow. On a redirect, John Pryor talks about the axe and the shovel. You acknowledge there were valid samples for Tylee, and the witness says yes. He says, but isn't it true there's no accurate way to determine how those samples got on the tools? The witness says, not with what I do in regards to DNA. And that was it for the day. We had a lot of breaks, and tomorrow there's one more witness Pryor will call, and then we'll see what happens after that. But that's it from Boise. I'm hoping to do a recap episode on tomorrow's testimony on Friday since I'm traveling pretty much all day. I will be in the courtroom for the morning session, leaving about 10 a.m. So until I get back home, hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, a good Thursday, and we'll see you soon.